And the debate is, does Trump actually have a plan, or does Scott Bessent have a plan? Like, just the Trump administration in general, do they know what they're doing, right? So again, I've seen two sides of the argument, and it's really difficult to say who's right because everyone is approaching this with a political bias, no matter if you're, it's like impossible to approach this without a political bias, right? As I mentioned earlier, people who are anti-Trump are just going to use this to bash Trump, and people who are pro-Trump are going to say, no, no, he has a plan. You just got to like see it through. So let me present some interesting kind of comments that I've seen, right? So this is a tweet by a gentleman named Marco, and he said that, Trump. So let me get this straight. Trump announces a 990,000% tariffs on every country in the world. Everyone panics, causing a crisis tier market downturn. And then he tweets, "It's a great time to buy." And then it was just kidding. Tariffs are only 10%, and the market recovers. How does everyone? How to get everyone relieved and begging to keep tariffs only 10% across the board? That's the art of the deal. He just posted this hours before he was announcing, just kidding about the super crazy tariffs on every country in the world. Yeah, I'm sorry, but this is the most objectively funniest thing I've ever seen. So again, this is like to Sunil, your argument that I think that you mentioned last week or a couple of weeks ago that it was your opinion that the 10% tariffs are permanent and they're going to stay. And this is like kind of Trump's plan to implement this. And I guess you are right on that, because I can definitely see how that's the case, right? Because like the 10% tariffs was probably the idea to begin with, but he just used all these like crazy tariffs as a distraction, and then he's going to lower it back down or negotiate and use those to extract concessions. And then everyone's going to be like, oh, thank God it's only 10% now. And then that's like how you get people to agree to a new norm, versus if he just came out of the gate with 10%, then that might be like, you might get a lot of protest, right? But now it's like people are like, fine, the 10% can stay. It's just, we'll deal with it, but just don't do all the other crazy stuff, right? So that's probably the idea, and I would agree with that sentiment. And yeah, again, what we talked about, I think you already touched upon this as well, Sunil, about the bond market. So apparently, according to some people, the word on the street is that the bond market was the one that forced Trump to delay the tariffs and announce the 90-day pause. And there's actually some evidence for this, where he said, Trump said later in the day after he announced the pause, that he was watching the bond market. So you know how he was always saying that I'm not watching the stock market, I don't care about the stock market. He actually admitted that he was watching the bond market, and then he said that people were feeling a little queasy. So I think that the bond market definitely has a bigger, like more forceful impact on Trump's decisions than the stock market. And I would not disagree with the idea that maybe the bond market was the one that forced Trump to announce his pause. And yeah, talking about the bond yields, this is like, as yields go up, bond prices go down, right? So the yields hit like 4.51% at one point. So I think that's what kind of prompted maybe some action. But actually, I'm looking at the bond yields right now, and we're actually again at 4.48%. So we're only about 3 basis points away from that magical kind of, Trump put, whatever you want to call it. Maybe this time it'll be a Fed put instead of a Trump put. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens later tonight. Like, will the bond yields rise even more, or maybe it'll stabilize at like 4.45 or 4.40, and then it'll stabilize there, and we can call it at night. So it's going to be interesting to see. But yeah, I'm looking at the bond yields right now, and it's not good once again. So yeah. And finally, let's talk about Anthony Pompliano, who, he says he's an independent, but I guess he's a little bit more on the pro tariff side these days, where he said, his thoughts on the current tariff situation. China and U.S. is obviously the main show. The increasing 10-year yield likely pushes the Fed to closer to acting in an emergency fashion. And the 10 years likely going up because China is trying to exert pain on the US by dumping treasuries. Other countries are coming to the table to negotiate, so expect trade deals announced within a week or so. Wall Street is starting to settle into the idea that tariffs will be part of the new normal. Good companies will likely do very well in the future. This is all noise in the long run. So this is his opinion, right? And tariffs will come down from an announced level to 5 to 10% in the steady state. So this is kind of his analysis on what will happen long term, and I mostly agree with pretty much most of what he said here. And yeah, lastly, we did get the news that Trump did say that the first tariff deal is very close. So we'll have to see. Like, do we believe him, or is he just saying that because the bond yields are kind of maybe blowing up again? So we'll have to see, right? So yeah, I mean, let me toss the question back to you guys. What do you guys think about the situation with the bond yields? I know, Sunil, you touched upon that a little bit earlier, but you can, if you could go into more detail. Do you think that this is that maybe Trump actually foresaw this and he's okay with it because he wants to use this as a tool to force Jerome Powell to act? So is there a scenario where the bond market continues to blow up like this and Trump just goes, not my problem, Jerome, you deal with it? Right? Like, is that what's going on? Or at some point will Trump cave, right? Because I feel like Trump is simultaneously playing two games of chicken. So he's playing a game of chicken with China on the trade war, and he's playing a game of chicken with Jerome Powell on interest rate cuts. So do you think that that is the case? And if so, who's going to win these two games, right? Like, do you think Trump is going to go 2 for 2? Or do you think he's going to win one and lose one? Or do you think he's going to lose both? Just your thoughts on everything in general.
The Trump is going to let bonds go nuts and enforce Jerome Powell's hand, and I think that is one of the primary goals here. And I think he did a version of this already in 2018, so I don't see why he wouldn't do it again. And I don't think Jerome Powell actually has the balls to let the United States government go into bankruptcy because he wouldn't. He is too stubborn to back Trump's crazy play. I think he's going to back it eventually, but he has to come up with a justification for why to do it. Like, I think I know that's like this is the kind of like narrative that makes Trump and Trump fans seem crazy, but I think that behind the scenes, this kind of stuff happens all the time, and I do believe that Trump is risking the bond market, and he's making the bet that Jerome Powell won't let it go too far. I don't think that Trump and Bissent are like if bond yields like probably hit a point 2 nights ago where Bissent and Trump were like, we should back off a little bit. Like I don't I think they are managing bond yields from their side, but I do believe they are okay with bond yields creeping up because they know that this will force the hand of Jerome Powell. And Jerome Powell also has a legacy that he's going by, right? Like, he doesn't want to be the guy that bankrupts the Treasury. So if it really gets out of control, he's intervened in the past, and I think he'll intervene this time. Um, in terms of the trade deals, yeah, I expect trade deals to start getting announced, or at least like that we're officially gonna like sit down with Japan or Europe or whatever. I think that buying U.S. bonds is gonna be a part of the deal, even if that part of the deal is a little bit more off to the side and not put in writing. But I have this inkling that I can't prove, but based on how like Bissent came out and praised Japan yesterday morning, and said that they're going to be first in line for the trade deal. I mean, the only reason why Japan would be first in line with the trade deal, other than Canada or Europe, is because Japan is a big purchaser of U.S. Treasury bills, and potentially a deal was made on the phone that China could hurt the United States by selling a lot of bonds all at once. So Japan needs to pick up the slack. And I think there's going to be a lot of deal. I think I can't ever prove this, and it's just one of those things that I have an inkling about. But I believe that Trump is going to be encouraging Europe, countries like Korea, countries like Japan, which are already big purchasers of treasuries, to potentially be ready to pick up the slack if China decides to dump treasuries on the market. And I think that is enough, like indicating that would be enough for China to back off, because it takes away one of their major, it takes away firing power, essentially. And I generally agree with a lot of the stuff that Pump is saying, which is that Trump is normalizing a VAT tax. Increasing U.S. revenue by $300 to $400 billion a year would be exactly what America needs to finance their debt restructuring, and it also creates an incentive for like European or Canadian or whatever Western companies that can operate wherever they want to potentially operate in the U.S. market. Like, I think that like if you're like a German steel company or something like that, or a steel company from like England or something, uh, if you could, if like America is like telling you that you can like avoid a 25% tariff by just like setting up shop in the United States, and I think a lot of European companies are going to start to do that. Like here's the thing I've been thinking about is that like I don't know if how intentional this is, but for Trump to like contrast America as like the anti degrowth economy, while like Europe and Canada have like entered this degrowth mentality around like climate change, and they've like entered this mentality around like regulations to like stop tech companies from being monopolies and all this other kind of mentality around the regulations. I can see Trump attracting a lot of capital away from other Western markets into the United States. I could also see Trump wanting Europe to kind of wake up and abandon degrowth, because it would be beneficial for America to have like Western powers that are like in the same line as Trump. Somebody who favors productivity over like something like fighting climate change or these globalism policies. So in the end, I think that major deals are going to be announced, and I think that Trump is going to have is going to be very effective in kind of pushing Western countries away from this like degrowth, anti-productivity mentality, which I think is risking our like well-being in the and it's risking our power in the world, essentially. Like I think Trump is going to successfully get Europe to normalize trade relations with America, normalize regulations, get off the back of big tech, and actually like join America and potentially join America in this like larger trade war with China, and kind of forcing China's hand and like forcing them into a corner. Like I really do see that being a scenario.
A lot of this has been kind of Trump's plan this whole way. I think that the Pompliano commentary regarding it, I think that he is relatively accurate with what Trump is trying to do and what is currently occurring. So I don't think that we should be expecting the American economy to just implode as a result of these tariffs. I think that they were a negotiating tactic. And based on that, just to be clear, you know, I don't think that we were wrong for being afraid of them. I think that especially like, you know, as people who, you know, have jobs and stuff, like I think that it's very fair to see what was going on and be very uncomfortable with what is currently occurring, or what has been occurring. And the volatility is never good. You know, you don't want your employer to get concerned and cut their expectations and as a result lay off a bunch of people or something, right? Like, so obviously I think that I understand the concerns of the population, of the people who were severely concerned about this whole situation. That being said, I do think that I was leaning towards the perspective that this was all a negotiating act, and I think that the pause has already basically proven that it's just a negotiating tactic. So I think that this is I think that Trump is playing a bit of a risky game here from my perspective, because he's kind of trying to walk the line of convince everyone to work with me, even though I am kind of being bombastic and uh, saying how they're taking advantage of America, and I'm going to threaten all these tariffs on them, and then I'm going to just kidding, no tariffs, all the like. He's got to kind of walk that line between being all kind of adversarial, yet at the same time convincing these countries to like work with him, and then target kind of get everyone's target more focused on China, where there is a perception from Trump that this is clearly the threat that exists for what Trump is trying to do. So, and on that front, I think I do think that it's likely that the yield increases as a result of countries like China dumping a bunch of treasuries, because that would be a way to hurt the U.S. without actively doing anything. Like, so that wouldn't surprise me. That would help explain the increase in the yield. And I don't think that Trump necessarily was not expecting that, but I don't think that he was definitively like, yes, this will raise the bonds. I think this was a situation of them kind of expecting it, that it may raise the bonds, but this is a risk they're willing to take. So at the end of the day, I don't think that this is going to be a crisis the way that a lot of people were concerned it would be. I think that it is definitely a lot of volatility occurring. And it's hard to say how the bond market will play out in the long term. I think the theories on like Japan and other countries buying the bonds instead will potentially be the case, but we'll kind of have to see how that plays out. But we're kind of in the process of the wait and see kind of process of like Trump is shaking the snow globe, and we're trying to figure out where the snow's going to land. And until we've kind of had time to see everything settle, we're just kind of sitting here hoping that it's going to land in a good way. And I do think in the long run, like good companies will probably still be fine. I think that all of that is true, and I think that maybe even the higher tariff rates at the 10% markish that Trump seems to have decided he's going to sneak in there and have everyone and act like he's done everyone a big favor. I think that will also be an incentive to companies to invest in the U.S. over other countries. But again, at 10%, I'm not sure how much that will impact it. So it's really going to be I like at the end of the day, I don't know if this is really going to change the system that much at the current level. I think we will kind of need to wait and see what happens. The China versus America duel, because that's really the real thing that changes things. Trump putting the 10% tariff on stuff, I don't think really changes the game. I think that the China versus US factor is really where we're kind of seeing much more risk, because that's a real conflict. Yeah, actually, Sunil, before you go, I'm just watching the 10-year Treasury yield still, and is at 4.486. So it's like 2.5 basis points away from where Trump had to step in last time, or percent, one of them. both of them. So are we witnessing something breaking as soon as tonight? So you can tack on that question in your response, Sunil.
But I was just gonna say that I just wanted to add to the because I meant to mention this, but like I think that the U.S. I think that the stock market can very easily price in a 10% tariff. Like it's something that's probably already priced in. I just wanted to mention that because a lot of people are saying, well, now we have to absorb the news that America might have a permanent 10% tariff. I think it kind of already priced it in. And sorry, what was that question you just asked? Sorry, Andy, what was that thing you just asked? Do I think it could break today? Yeah, it could break. It could break any hour.
The bond yields. I'm just watching it, and it's trading like a shit coin. It's trading like a market cap, like 100th place cryptocurrency, and it's just going up and down, and it just hit 4.48%. And yeah, like it's like 2 to 3 basis points away from the highest point that it hit 2 nights ago when like stuff started just breaking left and right, and Trump had to step in with a 90-day pause. So like if it goes above like that 4.5 ish level on the 10-year, like are we going to see some sort of other pivot? Like at this point, what could Trump do, right? Like obviously I don't think he wants to relent on China, because that's kind of the whole point of why he's doing all of this. So if there's nothing else that he can really do, then like, are we witnessing the breakdown of the fiat system as we speak right at this moment?
Yeah, I mean, if the Fed doesn't come to the rescue, then it's a breakdown of the fiat system. I think that Trump is okay with breaking it. I think he's gonna break it. I think he's gonna break the bond market, and I think he already did that, and nobody really admitted it at the time in 2018. And then the Fed came to the rescue, and I think he's gonna break it again. And I also think that tariffs aren't going to cause inflation because there's an income effect. Because if you actually had tariffs increase, you're going to have like, yes, tariffs increase, like it's a one-time increase, it's like a levy, it's a one-time increase in inflation, but it also has an impact on consumer spending. But yeah, Trump is okay with the bond market breaking. I honestly do believe that Trump is going to be okay with forcing the hand of Jerome Powell. He doesn't care if Jerome Powell will become kicking and screaming into rescuing the treasury market, and he knows that he will, and he's calling his bluff. And I think he's going to win, and it's going to trigger a lot of people.
Oh boy, it's much. It would be much more fun to watch if we weren't on the boat that he's steering into an iceberg. But that's besides the point. Yeah, I mean, by the way, for audiences watching in the future, we're recording this on April 10th at roughly 9:00 p.m. Eastern time. So if it does turn out that this was the moment that the entire bond market broke, or sometime in the not too distant future from here, yeah, just fun fact, you can refer to this video and get our live reactions to see what we were doing as the bond market completely collapses.